In the twilight years of the Ming dynasty, as corruption festered in the imperial court and the empire teetered on the brink of collapse, a group of scholar officials gathered in a quiet academy beside the shores of Lake Tai. Their mission was nothing less than the moral regeneration of China. The year was 1604. The Donglin Academy, originally founded during the Song dynasty, was re-established by Gu Xiancheng, a dismissed official who had witnessed firsthand the decay eating away at the Ming government. The academy's name, meaning Eastern Grove, would become synonymous with moral courage and political reform. The Donglin Movement emerged from a profound crisis of governance. The Wanli emperor had effectively abandoned his duties, refusing to hold court for decades. Eunuchs wielded unprecedented power, corruption was rampant, and the examination system that was supposed to select virtuous officials had become a tool for personal advancement rather than public service. Gu Xiancheng and his followers believed that China's problems stemmed from a fundamental moral crisis. They advocated for a return to the teachings of Confucius and Mencius, emphasizing practical ethics over abstract philosophy. The movement's philosophy was deceptively simple: the affairs of family, state, and world are the responsibility of every person. This wasn't merely academic theory, it was a direct challenge to the passive scholarship that had dominated Chinese intellectual life. The Donglin scholars faced formidable opposition. The eunuch faction, led by the notorious Wei Zhongxian, controlled access to the emperor and used their position to accumulate vast wealth and power. They saw the Donglin movement as a direct threat to their authority. Wei Zhongxian was perhaps the most powerful eunuch in Chinese history. He controlled not just the imperial household, but the entire apparatus of government. When Donglin scholars criticized corruption or called for reform, they were essentially challenging Wei's empire within the empire. The Donglin Academy became more than a school, it was a network. Graduates carried its principles into government service across the empire. They formed study groups, corresponded regularly, and supported each other's careers. Most importantly, they maintained their commitment to speaking truth to power. Their writings reveal men torn between duty and survival. Yang Lian, one of the movement's most prominent figures, wrote, "A minister who sees his ruler's faults and does not remonstrate is no minister at all. Better to die speaking truth than to live in comfortable silence." The conflict came to a head during the reign of the Tianqi emperor. Wei Zhongxian, now at the height of his power, launched a systematic purge of Donglin supporters. Yang Lian, Zhuo Guangdou, and other leading scholars were arrested, tortured, and executed. The persecution of the Donglin scholars was brutal, even by the standards of imperial China. Wei Zhongxian didn't just want to silence them, he wanted to break their spirit and demonstrate that moral principle was no match for raw power. Yang Lian died under torture in 1625, but not before writing a final memorial to the emperor detailing Wei Zhongxian's crimes. His words, smuggled out of prison, became a rallying cry for the movement's survivors. The Donglin movement's direct political influence ended with the purges, but its intellectual legacy proved more durable. When the Chongzhen emperor came to power in 1627, he executed Wei Zhongxian and rehabilitated many Donglin scholars. However, by then, the dynasty's problems had grown beyond any possibility of reform. The Donglin scholars represent a fascinating moment in Chinese intellectual history. They tried to bridge the gap between Confucian idealism and political reality. Their failure was not just personal, it was symptomatic of the deeper crisis facing traditional Chinese governance. Modern Chinese scholars have found new relevance in the Donglin movement. Their emphasis on moral integrity in public service, their critique of corruption, and their belief in the scholar's duty to society resonate with contemporary debates about governance and social responsibility. The Donglin scholars understood something that remains true today: political systems ultimately depend on the moral character of those who operate them. No amount of institutional reform can substitute for personal integrity. The questions that tormented the Donglin scholars remain painfully relevant. How do principled individuals navigate corrupt systems? When is compromise acceptable, and when does it become complicity? What price are we willing to pay for our convictions? The Donglin Movement failed in its immediate goals, but it succeeded in something perhaps more important: it preserved the ideal of moral courage in public life. Their example continues to inspire those who believe that individuals can make a difference, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The waters of Lake Tai continue to flow, just as they did 4 centuries ago when Gu Xiancheng first gathered his followers to discuss the problems of their age. The specific challenges have changed, but the fundamental questions remain: how do we live with integrity? How do we serve the greater good? How do we find the courage to speak truth to power? The Donglin scholars left us more than historical texts, they left us an example. In an age of cynicism and moral relativism, their unwavering commitment to principle offers both inspiration and challenge. They remind us that the pursuit of virtue is not a luxury for the privileged few, but a necessity for anyone who hopes to create a just society. 400 years after the Donglin Academy's founding, we are still grappling with the questions it raised. In our interconnected world, the stakes may be higher than ever. The Donglin scholars' legacy reminds us that moral courage is not a historical curiosity, it is a living necessity. Their story is ultimately about the power of individuals to change the world, not through violence or revolution, but through the quiet persistence of moral conviction. In their willingness to sacrifice career, comfort, and ultimately life itself for their principles, they offer us a template for meaningful engagement with the challenges of our own time. The Donglin Movement was both a product of its age and a voice that transcends it. Their academy may have been destroyed, their leaders executed, their immediate goals frustrated. But their fundamental insight, that political change must begin with moral transformation, remains as relevant today as it was in Ming China. As we face our own crises of governance and social responsibility, we might do well to remember the words carved above the entrance to the Donglin Academy: the sound of wind and rain, the sound of reading, all these sounds enter the ear. Family affairs, state affairs, world affairs, all these affairs are our concern.
Thanks for watching.